Loving response. This is the basic action of forgiveness. So we've been talking about mindfulness, and forgiveness cannot happen without us really being mindful of what's going on in our minds. So really being paying attention to the thoughts and the feelings that arise. Not forgiveness is not shining it on. Forgiveness is not saying, well, I'm just gonna let it go. Now, forgiveness can be almost a similar kind of a dismissal in saying, it's really not a thing. But we have to mean that it's really not a thing. It can't be just that we're saying that to kind of slide it off into the background. So that only can come from the recognition and acceptance of whatever has occurred that we now believe there is a response that needs to be made. Generally, when it's something that requires forgiveness, it's going to be some kind of an issue where we feel we've been hurt, we've been mistreated, we've been shortchanged, someone or some institution or has perpetrated some kind of wrongdoing upon us or one of our loved ones. Or actually, it could be someone who we're neutral to, but we see it as an injustice, and so we get upset. And this is the whole secret to why CNN and other news channels have become entertainment, because for some reason we are entertained by getting upset. And we think it's not that we're not, but really that's what it is. It's actually an entertainment in the sense, for sure, that it is a distraction from what's actually going on in the present moment with us wherever we're at. It lets us put our attention onto something else. That's not to say that when we see injustice that we don't want to try to help the situation. But the premise of a loving response is that you're not really going to be helpful out of anger. And although sometimes it seems like it is, but really it only seems like it is because we get some other kind of strange satisfaction out of revenge. We get, I think, actually even more of something. I'm not quite sure I could call it pleasure, but with the projection of how we're going to get revenge, or how revenge should occur, or this or that should happen to that person, as punishment. So loving response says, I'm going to look at the situation for what it is. I'm not going to go into denial about the situation itself. And then I'm going to apply something to it. I'm going to apply something to it to change the way I see it. And we'll use, now people out there aren't going to know what I'm talking about, but they'll just have to come to church to find out. So that picture back there on the wall, and I always point this out for this exercise, is the yellow one. If you look at it, it's like this yellow background, and it's got a black orb and some strange spiky thing up in the corner there, and some white lines, but what it actually is it's a winter sky. It's a winter sky, and the sun is black on it, and there's an icicle hanging off the corner of a building. And there's trees. The white things are trees, and all that's happened there is that the colors have been exchanged. So when you first look at that, when people first look at it, I don't think anybody sees it right away. You have to look at it for a little bit to see what it is. And this is really a good example of how forgiveness works, that we think we see one thing, and then when we take a few moments and really look at what's going on, we see many other things. And this is very important, because forgiveness is not justification. Forgiveness is not being magnanimous and saying to someone, yes, you've been a butt, but I'm going to be the larger person and let it go. This is not forgiveness either. That's us doing what naturally comes to us. Put ourselves up here and the other person's down here, and we're going to be generous for the purpose of the ego, really. But so what the forgiveness does is it says, I recognize the situation, and I recognize that it was unfortunate and caused suffering, perhaps to others, or has potential for causing suffering. But also, what forgiveness does is it sees that it came from suffering. That's like one of the important first things, is to see that the action, whatever it was that the other person perpetrated, came from their suffering. And again, this is not to say that it's okay because it came from that we're suggesting that just because they were suffering that they have license to do whatever they want to do. That's not the case. But what's important is for us to see this cause and effect kind of relationship, and then also to allow that same cause and effect to deliver its own consequences. So, because all of these things do. Like the punishment for many of our own transgressions is the transgression itself, and then the ripples that it sets up inside ourselves, subsequently. So now again, as a society, as a community of people, that doesn't mean that we just allow people to do whatever they want to do and put everybody else in danger either. But anything that we do to protect the community needs to be done out of that same idea of a loving response. Yes, we may have to contain the person. We may have to move them out of the general population, but not to be doing it. See, we get caught up in this whole idea of we got to get revenge on these folks. And again, like CNN and even our local news channels, the whole thing. Did anybody see Nightcrawler? If you see that, you got to watch that movie Nightcrawler, because this really hits it. What the local news channel wanted was murder and mayhem as quickly and as bloodily as possible, put on the screen at night, because that for some reason that it keeps people watching. But what we're talking about here in loving response is to one person at a time try to change this idea and say, yes, we do want to take care of things for the community, for society, but we want to do it in a way that's helpful. That we can, and we're even afraid. We'd be afraid to say it, right? Go to court and ask the judge for loving response and see what the response is. Whoa. So, but this is but we start with ourselves, right? So, so then, to take it a step further, after we have to contain someone, we want to alleviate their suffering. So this is a whole different mindset. It's a whole different mindset of what we're used to. And there was a time when everybody knew that prison was just getting rid of somebody, get them out of society, and was also very clearly for punishment. And then there came a little bit of a change where we thought it might be a good idea to try to do some rehabilitation. And but then that pendulum swung back the other way, and people want punishment. People want, these dire consequences. But recently, there has been a lot of work done in the prison system with mindfulness training and meditation in general, not just in the United States, but all over the world. In India, it's really, really become effective, really eliminating violence in the prisons where they use it. So this is it's not now some esoteric kind of science. This mindfulness, we know for the last 15 years, it's been growing with Western psychologists and being extended out. And this is really where we can alleviate the suffering. So first we alleviate our own suffering, personal suffering, by this mindfulness practice that continually reminds us that we are not that small self that continues to try to get what it wants. continually sees the world as it's being shortchanged, that we are actually part of this larger organism. When we start doing that for ourselves, then and see the benefit, then it's much easier for us to be advocates for getting this practice more and more widespread, because it works. It works. So when we're forgiving, we need to understand that this forgiveness is actually a kind of it's a process. It's a process of love, and in the bulletin I capitalized the word love there because I see the love that it comes from is the larger love that exists. And we think talking about mindfulness practice, it exists in the ground of all being. So when we say, like usually when I'm not talking from this Buddhist point of view, and I'm just talking from some people would call it a liberal Christian point of view, but only in that we want to do what Jesus said, not perhaps what Paul said. But that the difference is the ground of all being would be God, the wholeness of God, the unity of all life. So this is our true identity arises from this ground of all being, and so does everyone else's. So the whole entity could actually be described the same way as we would say God is, as in John where he says God is love. We would say that the ground of all being is love. The love being the connection of all things and the desire of that entity for good for all things. So through this love, we can forgive. And we can see it as we do in the meditation at the end. This love is a spark of light in the heart through which all good things are possible. And it's this light that we extend out from us to heal the world. It's this light, see, and it's a symbol. It's just a symbol, but it's a helpful symbol to say, I'm going to extend this light out into the world, and that light shining on this situation, that light shining on this person is what changes my perception so that I can see what that picture really is. So I can see what that picture, what the stressful situation, what it really is. The light of love allows me to see differently. So all good things spring from this love and as a result of giving it. So our well-being, peace, prosperity, abundance, it all comes as a direct result of loving. Now, we can get some sort of peace. We can get some kind of strange prosperity from actually extending aggression rather than love. But it is neither lasting nor satisfying. You just keep having to go back with the stick over and over again. Now here's the thing about this. When we become mindful, we should know that what evolution has done is it's actually made the stick much more powerful in our minds than the carrot. Because again, as we evolved, and the world is very dangerous, whether you think it happened by accident, by God, or by our own design, it was very important that you not get the stick, because the stick could more often than not kill you. So we would go for avoidance of the stick much more strongly than we would go for the pursuit of the carrot. Even though we got to get the carrot once in a while because we got to eat, right? But we would be much more, let's say, timid in the pursuit of the carrot. So we have a bias. And we talked about this a little bit last week. We have a negative bias. It's the way that naturally the way our brains work. But mindfulness training can alter and throw the balance the other way, and also not put us in danger, because the very practice itself makes us more aware of what's going on. So we don't get into situations where the negative bias is going to even be helpful, or we get into the situations less. They still happen from time to time. So we give love, and the giving rewards us over and over again. Past regret and resentment block love. So all these things from the past that continue to pop up from time to time, they need to be dealt with in the same way, to shine the light of love. We have to see it's happened. It may have happened years ago, but it haunts us still. And everybody's got something like that. And this is the same thing, loving response. When it comes up, you think, oh, that happened a long time ago. I can't respond to it anymore. It's done. It's over. Well, yes, it is done and over, but you keep playing it over and over again in your mind. So we stop. We pause. We examine it for what it is, and we give it loving response. Loving response to the situation, to the people involved, but most importantly to ourselves. This idea of self-compassion is so powerful, and it actually, when there's been a number of studies done about this, it's part of mindfulness practice, but it's a little bit, the idea of actually formally and informally giving love to ourselves, and not in some egotistical kind of way. Treating ourselves the same way we treat someone else who is suffering and we felt compassion for. It has a positive effect on just about every physical and mental ailment that we suffer from. So in this, when we have regrets, yes, we made a mistake. We need to practice self-compassion. And self-compassion doesn't mean that we don't get to take responsibility or that somehow we escape consequences of whatever the actions were. We take the consequences. We say, yes, I'm responsible. But then we forgive. Then we see ourselves in the light that shows us the reason that this happened was because I was afraid. The reason I did this was because I was that fear caused anger, which then triggered this. But what mindfulness does is it gives us the opportunity that going forward, we can short circuit that process. That fear doesn't turn to anger, or even if it does, we can pause long enough to stop it, to at least not act on it, right? And then to work further to actually forgive the conditions that it sprang from. So there's a change of perspective, to see things differently. The change frees us from the past. It lets us pause and not react as new situations arise. And we can examine the event unemotionally. This is like really important to start to really establish that observer in us. And you can see it. If once you stop and step back a little bit, you can actually see the small self reacting emotionally. You can actually see the mind reacting emotionally, but you are observing. And you realize that's not me. And this is what the Buddha said. Anger, not me, not you. It's not you. It's an emotion. You are actually observing the emotion. That's up to you, whether you go with the emotion or not. So we see past events differently by reviewing them in this new light. We see present happenings in a fresh way. If we're anxious and afraid, we can stay with those feelings for a moment. They will not last if we really stay with them, if we don't try to push them away. We stay with them and look at them. 20 seconds, most. Tops, they're gone. Now, they may come back again in a minute. Especially if it's like a conditioned response, right? There's something else going on that the mindfulness therapy will eventually help, right? But to continue to do that, to continue to stay with the anxiety, continue to stay with the fear for a moment, see what it is, look at it. This is like almost an automatic mechanism of forgiveness where you're not even thinking about it as forgiveness, but staying with it, examining, it goes away. So we can take refuge in our meditative practice at any time. And this, you can do this any way that feels comfortable to you. You can actually say to ourselves these things like, yes, I feel this upset right now. But so what I'm going to do is I'm take refuge in my Buddha nature. I'm going to take refuge in Christ consciousness. I'm going to take refuge in God, if that's what feels comfortable to me. I'm going to take refuge in the ground of all being. And we say it to ourselves, and it may not seem like much when I say it now, but when we actually say it to ourselves, something happens inside. It actually triggers chemical reactions in us. We respond to it at multiple levels. We no longer need to hold anyone else responsible for the situation. Yes, they may be responsible for what they did. But they are no longer responsible for the situation because now it's in my mind and now it's up to me what I do. If we really want to change our life, we have to see it differently. So we change our mind and our vision. We try to see love. We try to see good. We try to see the opportunity for more good. All right, these are the two most important ones. We're gonna do this and then we're gonna end it. Guiltless. To say to yourself, I'm guiltless. And you go, oh yeah, really. I'm guiltless. To forgive our mistakes. We're guiltless. The mistakes we've made are just mistakes. We talked about this last week. They can be corrected. The errors of yesterday can be healed with a generous application of love today. In the past, we may have held on to feelings of guilt and remorse because we thought that we needed to be held accountable, that we needed to be held to account for our many shortcomings. But we're beginning to understand that being accountable means that we first take responsibility and then we do what's necessary to repair the harm and finally release ourselves from the bondage of guilt. Holding on to guilt is this way that we also hold on to old patterns. We identify it as ourselves. We identify these actions that we've done. That's me. That's what I do. That's what I always do. I don't know what's wrong with me. I always keep doing that over and over again. Well, we keep doing it over and over again because we're guilty about it. We think it's us. We think this is just how I am. It's not true. So it sets us up for repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So we stop. We forgive. We forgive the mistakes. We take responsibility. We do whatever's necessary to repair it, and we move on, opening the way for new experiences. Now, for some people, that's the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is to let go of their own guilt. For other people, the hardest thing to do is to let go of their indictments of others. For some of us, both of them are pretty tough. So to say, I am innocent, but everyone else is innocent. This is like the hardest lesson to learn. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to even consider because we look around and we say, they are not innocent. We may have all sorts of names that we associate with them that don't have anything to do with innocence. We know that people, including ourselves, do unfortunate things. Yes. No denial. Yes, people do ugly things. In such a case, we hold them responsible. Yes, they're responsible for doing what they did. We can even call them irresponsible in what they did. However, whatever is appropriate. But innocent means something else in this context. It means that the essence of us is without blemish. It means that the Christ consciousness, the Buddha nature, the love that we spring from the ground of all being, that has no stain. So when we say innocent, we're going back to our true identity. And this is this ultimate action of forgiveness. To wipe out, to wipe from our minds these past occurrences. So hurtful actions arise from suffering. And they are the cause of more suffering. But they do not reflect our true worth. So we forgive those who may have harmed us in any way whatsoever, meaning that we see them as their best and highest self. Not easy. It's a practice. It's a practice. If we could just do it, boy, it'd be a lot different, wouldn't it? It's a practice. So we see ourselves as guiltless. We see our brothers and sisters as innocent. We see everyone in the light of love. And whereas in the past we may have found some false comfort in blaming and condemning others, look, it's delicious to talk about the misdeeds of others. Get all caught up in it. And we can say, we can couch it in any terms that we want to. We can act like we're concerned for the welfare of the community when we report this. Oh, did you see what they did? But just stop for a moment and look within and see what's the motivation here. The motivation is always trying to make ourselves feel better by making someone else look worse. So we're going to let them go. We're going to release them from judgment. We're going to understand that negative judgment locks us all into this continuing cycle of alienation and separation. So right now, try to see the good. When the wrong occurs, we're going to recognize it. Yes, it's real. Well, you can think it's real here. Okay, it's real here. But in the essence of things, it's not. But here, right now, it's real. So a minute ago it was real. Right now, it's not. I don't know if you follow that or not. It doesn't matter. But it's not real in the essence of things. And this is how it turns to Teflon and rolls off of us. When we can see that's the past. It's already happened. It's gone. It's done. Let's do what needs to be done right now. So we end up, we become free of the need to judge others, and so we can forgive. So loving response means. And by the way, there's a self-defense method, Japanese. It's called Aikido, and it actually, one of the meanings of the word, I mean, it can be, there's a couple of meanings, but one of the prominent meanings of the word is loving response. They don't hit anybody. I know it wouldn't sell tickets. You couldn't get it on television as a primetime deal. But the master cannot be touched, and he never hits anybody. She never hits anyone. It's really kind of a beautiful dance to watch, but it's loving response. It allows. So this is the thing to think about with this idea of forgiveness: is loving response means that when an aggression occurs, you move aside slightly and allow the energy of the other person's aggression to go past you. And so see in this, and you can watch if you actually see these guys as they do it, that it's the other person's energy that actually comes back to themselves. So yes, they end up on the mat, but not because their opponent tried to hurt them. It was only their own movement, their own energy that came back. So this is the whole idea in forgiveness is we are going to be loving. We are going to lovingly respond, but we're going to allow the person's actions to be its own consequence. And then further, this idea is that we will try to alleviate their suffering. So if they fall on the ground and break their arm, we'll patch them up, right? That's enough.